I bought a condo way back in 2018 as my first property, and I house hacked it for a couple of years, and I still own it today as a full rental. Thankfully, there haven't been too many surprises and things have gone smoothly, though it has confirmed a number of lessons about investing in condos generally. Starting with number one, it's very important to understand the rental restrictions that a condo might be subject to. When you buy a condo, you're buying a property that's within a homeowners association or an HOA. And these HOAs can put a bunch of different restrictions over the property. And the HOA is the thing that owns all of the common property on the condo development, so they typically have a lot of leeway when it comes to placing rules on those things. But a common thing that HOAs do is put restrictions on rental properties, and these restrictions can vary widely. And they can change as well. That's the thing about a homeowners association, is it's a living, breathing thing. It's very much like a government, just at the property level. And that government can change the laws in many cases. Some HOAs might restrict someone from renting out a property entirely. Some might restrict it in certain cases, often with short-term rentals. Those often aren't allowed. Or sometimes there's a rental cap on the number of units that can actually be rented out in an entire building if it's many different units. So when I was buying this unit, I made sure to find one that first off allowed rentals, and I was trying to find one that also had other rental units in the building. This can be a bit harder to figure out, but my thinking there was, if there are a number of other owners in the building who have rentals, then the chances that an HOA would come in and ban rentals would be a bit lower, because there are other owners in the building who have a vested interest in keeping those rentals alive. But my HOA did have some restrictions against short-term rentals. I think those tend to be a lot more common in the grand scheme of condo restrictions, but I wasn't really worried about that since I was buying this as a long-term rental, more of your traditional 12-month lease, longer-term leases, and that sort of thing. But either way, it does limit my freedom to do certain things with the property. So it's always something to keep in mind with condos. Now, the second lesson is to watch out for special assessments, and these can come up at any time, because a special assessment is a one-off assessment from the HOA. Assessments are sort of like a tax on all the owners that an HOA can charge to maintain all the operations of the actual building, whether it be common area maintenance, whether it be a property manager, whether it be landscaping, or whatever's going on to actually maintain the property. The HOA charges dues typically every month, and homeowners in the condo association will pay those dues. But every now and then there might be a big thing that needs to be changed or repaired. Maybe it's an unexpected repair of a major system or a big landscaping project. Whatever it is, sometimes the HOA decides that it needs to raise some cash to get that project done, and it does that via a special assessment. And I've been hit with a couple of special assessments since I've owned this property. Now, none of them have been too crazy, but they do come up and you have to be prepared for them. My HOA does have a pretty low regular assessment, so those monthly payments that I have to keep making. And that actually includes water as well, so it's not separately metered water for the building, so that does include that. But partly because the regular assessments are rather low, the HOA has to supplement a lot of that with special assessments when it comes to larger repairs that might not have been too routine. And for my rental, I've made sure to keep setting aside a little bit of money each month for the eventual special assessment that may or may not come up, and I really just count it as part of capital expenditures when it comes to my budget. And even though I haven't had to spend too much on the inside of my specific unit, I'm still responsible for my portion of the common areas, so I always want to be careful there. And speaking of the inside of my own unit, this would bring me to lesson number 3, which is that it can be difficult to get work done within your unit. And that can be from a combination of a couple of things. For one, there might be some harsh restrictions from the HOA on what kind of work you can get done and when. And number 2 would just be in the layout of the building, because you have multiple units on top of each other in many cases. So if something happens in the unit above you, that might leak down onto the unit that you're in, and then you have to figure out a way to repair that because it's really their problem to fix, but now you're relying on them to fix it, and you see where I'm getting at. It can be pretty difficult to coordinate things like that if there's a problem on the inside of the building between the units. In a very real way, their problem can quickly become yours. But the building I'm in isn't a huge high-rise, which typically has a lot more of those specific building restrictions, so it has been easier to get any work done. I haven't really had to do any major rehab, thankfully anyways. It was already in pretty good shape when I bought it, and I made a couple of minor improvements here or there that really didn't need any approval. But if I ever had to reroute plumbing or something like that, I definitely would have to get the approval of the HOA first, so that's another layer of complication. I'd say the biggest issue that I ran into with this unit is that one of the common building lines actually leaked into my unit ceiling. It wasn't a bad leak by any means, but it was noticeable. It's leaving a spot on the ceiling. ceiling and it needed to be repaired. But it really wasn't my job to repair it because it was the HOA's property technically. So they had to get in there and repair it, and that took quite some time because the HOA had to approve the work and it was all being run through them, and that's a committee ultimately, so you have multiple personalities to deal with, and everyone was pretty reasonable with the whole process, but it takes time. But like I said, things have gone pretty smoothly to this point, so I can't complain. But it's something to watch out for regardless. Now let's get into some bonus lessons and red flags when it comes to owning a condo, whether it be as a rental or more generally. Thankfully, these haven't really been applicable to my condo, but it's definitely something to watch out for. So moving into number 4, that would be seeing how an HOA is communicating with all of its owners. And this could cut both ways. Sometimes an HOA will be very relaxed and it will pretty much say nothing even as problems are compounding, even if there is a dispute between fellow owners and there's no one to mediate that dispute because the HOA is very unresponsive. That can be a problem. But on the flip side, if the HOA is overbearing and is micromanaging everything, that's going to be miserable as well. So you definitely want to get a feel for that dynamic. And the thing is, that dynamic is also dynamic. It changes because the people in an HOA often change from year to year. These terms aren't forever. People sell their units, people move out, you get new people who come in, whether it be a nasty political process or not. The fact of the matter remains is that these are people who live here, and the people run the HOA and people move in and out. But try to pay attention to what the HOA likes to do, and if you want to get something done, be sure to try and follow their processes closely, or at least the way they like them done, and you'll be more likely to have some success. Number 5, we kind of already hit on this, but it's looking at the number of renters versus the number of owners in a building. This isn't always easy to figure out, but sometimes it is, especially if there's a rental cap and they're already keeping track of the number of rentals anyway. But even though I said earlier that it's nice to see that some units are rentals, it doesn't mean that I want to see all of them as rentals, because every now and then you're going to come across a condo property that is full of rentals and is almost entirely rentals or is majority rentals. And sometimes you see a breakdown because you sort of lose that pride of ownership thing that a condo community full of only owners living there would have. This is a double-edged sword, but it is nice to have people who own the place there, keeping an eye on it regularly and making sure that things are being maintained. When it comes to an absentee landlord who might not be there, it's very hard to keep tabs on what's going on with the property. And since every owner has an interest in the common areas, it would be nice to have someone there keeping an eye on it, and a tenant's not going to care because they're just responsible for their lease. They don't care about the common areas. So I guess you could say you want to see some rentals on the property if you're interested in renting it yourself, but you probably don't want to see all rentals because that can get messy pretty quickly. Which leads me to the 6th lesson, and that's looking for poorly maintained common areas. Remember, as a condo owner, you own a portion of the common areas. So if those common areas aren't maintained, someone's going to have to maintain them at some point, and guess who's coming out of pocket for that? Everyone, including you. And if we're talking about a rental unit, your tenants are going to want to have that common area look nice or be maintained. So you want to make sure that is kept up from that perspective too, because it's common areas that they probably can use pretty regularly too. And if they're in disrepair, that's going to reflect negatively on your own rents and all that good stuff. So you definitely want to make sure that the common area is being maintained and someone is on it. The 7th lesson is to pay attention to the reserves on the condo. This is closely linked to maintenance, because if the reserves for that association are low, then if there's a big repair that needs to be made, they're going to raise that money through a special assessment in all likelihood, so you're going to have to come out of pocket. Or they might end up raising your regular monthly assessment to make up the difference over time. Whatever the case, it's money out of your pocket. But ideally, you can be in a condo association that has nice reserves going in. And the 8th issue is to watch out for any pending lawsuits or potential legal issues for the association to deal with. Associations can and do get sued, and if they lose a lawsuit, they might be out of pocket a big amount of money to pay for whatever issue, and guess who has to refill the coffers of that condo association? That's right, all of the condo owners. Now, the HOA should have some insurance on hand, but of course there's a chance that that thing isn't covered or the association has to come out of pocket still. But you definitely want to tread carefully and make sure that the association isn't under some big pending lawsuit before you get into the property, because that would be very irritating to deal with, especially if you weren't even there when the trouble was happening. Thankfully, I haven't had to deal with that with my condo, but it's something to look out for. Now, like I mentioned, buying this condo has worked very well, and I plan to continue to hold it for the long term and use it as a rental. Condos tend to be a very affordable way to get into an otherwise unaffordable area, so they are a potentially great tool for investors, and they typically are just more affordable in general because it's often a much smaller piece of property compared to a big old house and a big old lot that you might not be able to afford right away, so they are a potential great investment tool. You just have to watch out for some unique red flags, and you definitely can be successful with investing in a condo. If you like this video, be sure to subscribe, and until next time.